Hello and welcome to the latest in the Press Pass series on Back of the Net, where we chat to broadcasters and journalists who are involved in the beautiful game. Now, whilst we usually speak to people who are directly associated with AFC Bournemouth, this time we're spreading our wings a little further afield with a couple of journalists who know the Championship inside out. But firstly, what we're going to do is bring in Jeff Hayward, my podcast colleague. Jeff, how are you doing?
Very good, Sam. Thank you.
Are you ready for the new season yet?
Do you know, full of anticipation because it feels like it's a bit of a mystery. And I think that's what this show's going to be really good, to get some insights from pundits and broadcasters who know what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely. So in order to talk more about what lies ahead then, I'm going to be introducing two respected names in sports journalism who they'll be able to give us a tremendous insight on the division that AFC Bournemouth will hopefully be gracing this season. The Championship, the second tier, people call it the most exciting league in the world. In recent years, we were only in it for 2 seasons. So are we being over-optimistic by thinking that we can climb out of it at the first time of asking? Firstly, I'm going to introduce for you Daniel Storey. Chances are you're probably following him on Twitter already. He's a football writer and broadcaster whose work can often be seen in the BBC, in the iPaper, as well as doing lots for the Premier League, Football 365 and beyond. And he happens to be a devoted Forest supporter as well. Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. And as well as Daniel, we are delighted to also be joined by Nancy Frostick as well, who is the Sheffield Wednesday writer for The Athletic. She's also penned articles for the iPaper too, has a wealth of experience covering the Championship. And I gather, Nancy, you have somewhat of a soft spot for the Owls as well. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, you can't help but kind of get emotionally invested when you watch them every week and go on the emotional journey, which it always is watching Wednesday. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we'll talk to you first then, Nancy. I mean, as a Sheffield Wednesday writer, I mean, it must be an interesting place to be at the moment. It's a club that's steeped in history, with your rivals, obviously, currently riding high in the Premier League. And this season, you're going to be sat at the bottom of the table even before a ball's been kicked. What's the atmosphere like there at the moment?
I would say, actually, weirdly, it's probably more optimistic than if you'd asked me this maybe just before lockdown, because I think there was just such a need to find out what was going on with that charge. And then obviously now Wednesday know where they stand. Obviously they are appealing that decision, but they know where they're at with it. And they've brought in a couple of good new signings, and Gary Monk's got his new backroom staff in now. So he's got Andy Hughes, who was previously at Huddersfield, James Beattie and Darryl Verhaven have come from Birmingham, where he worked with them before. So to be honest with you, it seems quite upbeat. There's quite a sense of unity in the squad, and it's kind of almost a us against the world mentality, which I think you've seen before. Where maybe if you think about when Leeds started on -15, I think it was in League One, and still made the playoffs, that sort of thing. It's not to say that that's necessarily on Wednesday's mind at the minute. Trying to get to the playoffs, but I'd say it's a similar, upbeat kind of positive mood at the minute, so that's good.
And Daniel, Forest, I mean, a club decorated all over Europe, like Sheffield Wednesday. You're seemingly another team truly embedded in the Championship. Lots we can talk about, I'm sure, but I must start by asking, how has Forest overcome the playoffs?
Well, I mean, that's $1 million question, and I'm not sure they have. If ever Forest needed a 3-month break rather than a 6-week break, it was this season, because I mean, Bournemouth fans, I'm sure, will know it became a bit of a national joke that Forest needed to, well, effectively ended needing up not to lose 4-1 at home to Stoke on the final day, and did exactly that, lost 4-1 at home to Stoke on the final day. And we've been here before. We've never got to a playoff final. If we're going to do it, it's going to be automatic promotion. I can guarantee that, because, we seem addicted to this farce at the end of the season of just collapsing several meters before the finishing line.
Yeah, it was an absolutely crazy watch, really, seeing your game on Sky Sports and then seeing the scores come in from Swansea as well. Couldn't believe it. And it just sums up what the Championship is all about. But, judging by that final day, Daniel, and, also 20 years in the Championship, it's obviously a difficult league to get out of. So what was it like to see a little club from Dean Court manage it in 2 years?
I think the only golden rule of the Championship is that it's a complete meritocracy, and you get out what you put in. And if you're a club that has got a kind of lingering, hardwired arrogance or a chip on its shoulder that it doesn't deserve to be there, I think you get found out pretty quickly. And Forest have done that over the last decade. They've been a club basically built on sand and false promises and past glory, and none of those are particularly helpful when getting promoted. You look at clubs that have done it well. Sheffield United is one, Bournemouth is another, Leicester. They've had a plan and they've stuck to it. Whether it's a flagship manager, whether it's a recruitment model, whether it's a rich owner, they've done things pretty sensibly. And Forest have very rarely done anything sensibly. We've had more managers than most clubs have had new signings. So, yeah, I honestly believe under the new regime that things have changed off the pitch, and if not on it at the end of last season, we at least saw some bright sparks, because we weren't really expecting to get in the playoffs anyway last season. But this is the acid test, because we did collapse again, and it's how we respond to that.
And Nancy, I think I speak for all Bournemouth fans saying that you will always be part of Bournemouth folklore after what you did to Watford in the last minute 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So thank you. But from our perspective, I mean, the Premier League wasn't that great. Many Bournemouth fans look at the Championship as being a really exciting league. We look at it as almost we're going to be embracing our relegation to a division which many of us regarded as a fun place to be, but that's possibly because we had 2 years of success in it, I guess. What do you feel about it as a division for Wednesday fans? Because like Daniel, as Forest fans, you've been in there a long time now. How do you feel about the division?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I was literally just before I came on watching, it was like a Sky Sports clip, and they basically clipped together the last day of the season, where obviously you had all those teams scrapping to stay up, and then obviously Forest and Swansea and all of that playing out, and Brentford and West Brom dropping in and out of the top of second and third. So from that point of view, like, you can't help but love it just as a football fan. I mean, it's great if your team's not involved. So like the last day of the season, from my point of view, obviously Wednesday were needing points because we didn't know what was happening with the EFL thing, but also it wasn't a massive game against Middlesbrough. Like, probably beating Neil Warnock was like the biggest line to have come out of that. So and they didn't, but that was like probably the main drive there. But yeah, it's such a fantastic league. Like, honestly, I think it's easier to have fond memories and think of it if your team has obviously blitzed through the league and gone straight up. And there's definitely kind of a lingering pain for teams like Forest and Wednesday, and probably Leeds, that have been there for a while. And it's, especially if you've come close and kind of got to playoff finals or done that sort of crumbling away, which is, I feel like for those sorts of clubs that have been knocking around in the Championship for a couple of years, you almost need then like 2 to 3 years just to get over that sort of getting so close, unless you've got a Bielsa or someone really iconic with great philosophy and everything, just to keep the momentum going, because it really is a sucker punch for these bigger clubs, if you want to think of them that way, traditionally. So, but yeah, I think it's a fantastic league. I love it.
And Nancy, what do you think of the ingredients that make it such a good league? Because for me, if I'm going to answer that question myself, it's the variety of teams that you can play. I mean, this season there's Wickham with a 9,000 seater stadium or whatever, and then you can go to Hillsborough where it's near 40,000. It's just a variety of teams, and the fact it comes thick and fast. What for you makes it so exciting?
Yeah, I think it's that, actually. Like, so I mean, like as a reporter, I've not been necessarily going to games for that long, but like the Championship and reporting on a Championship club has taken me to Luton, which I think is the most fantastic ground because, you know, it's built into basically into a row of houses in, you know,
I love that stadium.
It was unbelievable. Like, and not to say that you don't get that in the Premier League, but obviously I think just getting that range of that sort of ground, which is a bit older, you know, like really well loved and has been there for ages, through to even just going somewhere like Cardiff, which is a bit more of a generic stadium. But again, it's kind of, you see all sides of it where some of the clubs obviously haven't had like the massive Premier League money to just think, oh, we'll build a brand new stadium and, you know, do something that's not the same as other clubs, because I know a lot of thought goes into stadium design, but it's kind of, I don't know, I love that side of it and really getting into the areas and the communities that are like round the grounds as well.
Before I hand over to Jeff again, I just want to say about Luton. I mean, that's one I really hope fans are allowed back in, because I've said it on a podcast before, it's the strangest experience. You go down a road of terraced houses and all of a sudden there are these away gates, and then you walk through someone's back garden in order to get into the back of the stand. And when you see it, it's this row of greenhouses or whatever it is, or beach huts on the left-hand side. It's such an eclectic ground, and I really hope that fans are allowed back in by the time that we can go there. But anyway, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like the Championship is more connected to the realities of football than some of the Premier League experience might be. But what do you think, Daniel? What makes it special, but also what makes it so difficult to get out of?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the special, what makes it special is that absolute variety, and also, you know, I know you mentioned it briefly, but the relentlessness of the schedule, especially this season, the fact that managers know, for good and bad, that if they win on Saturday, they've got another game on Tuesday, and if they lose, they've got a chance to put it right. That's great. I also think it's a great league for young players, because even more so this season, clubs will have to rely on deeper squads, and you do get those, you know, I know Jude Bellingham was the story of last season, but you look at some of the players in Championship clubs like Louis Sibley at Derby, and there is a chance for 17-year-old kids to make their name. But we should also say that it's a division that's basically founded on financial desperation, because, you know, I read a report the other day that said, you know, Reading detailed that Reading spend basically 260% of their revenue on wages. So there are clubs, and mine included, Forest included, that go above and beyond because of that sniff of the Premier League. And it's that desperation, I think, which creates those kind of magic end of season stories where everyone's clambering or in our case, collapsing for the line.
So, I mean, so what do you think has been the missing piece for Nottingham Forest in their ambitions to get back into the Premier League over the last sort of 20 years? What have you not had that other teams have?
I mean, firstly, at the moment with Sabri Lamucci, the end of the notwithstanding, this is probably the first time in maybe 20 years that Forest have got a manager that I'm more scared of losing than us sacking. We've sacked so many managers. We managers barely have a year in the job, and I hope that that's changed. But we also have a really good academy, and yet we spend, you know, our turnover of players is astonishing. I think signed something like 40 players in the last 2 and a bit years, and there's just been this kind of revolving door sense that nothing's ever really going to stick while there's this constant turn and churn of players. So that's something we've got to get right. Use the academy more. We'll probably sell Matty Cash, our right back, for 10 or 15 million pounds this summer if Fulham will pay it, that's a good sign, the fact that we're doing that. We shouldn't, for too long, we've seen the idea of selling players as a weakness, not a strength. You know, the fact that we can do that and then reinvest, that's what we should be doing, not just throwing more money at the problem. But I can't say with any honesty that we've definitely got over that, but I hope we have.
And what do you think is the secret, Nancy, to the failure of clubs like Derby, Forest, Sheffield Wednesday? I mean, some really big clubs still languishing in the Championship. Is it the desperation, the weight of expectation? What is it?
I mean, I think probably, especially talking about Wednesday and Leeds, they've not been that financially stable. You know, they've both dropped down into League One, and Wednesday were on the brink for a while, you know, looking like administration and all sorts. Not too long ago since they've been relegated, and obviously Leeds had all those problems as well. So obviously we think of them as big clubs because of the fan bases, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've had all that backing that maybe they have now got with newer owners. But yeah, I think so that takes time. When they got relegated, both Leeds and Wednesday have been in League One and come back up again. And I think, especially for Wednesday, they came so close. It was only 3-4 years ago that they were in the playoffs, and it looks like they had the recipe there for success. And had Carlos Carvajal, and he was great, and all the players looked to be moving in the right direction. But then again, it's a similar problem to what Daniel was just saying about Forest, where the owners invested a lot of money in the playing squad, which then has had its problems with FFP and all of that, which is why they are where they are now on -12. But also just selling players at the right time, or even selling them at all, instead of just letting the clock run down on the contract and then, letting them leave for nothing, where you'd think even $1 million, $500,000, it does all count in the Championship when you're basically having to play by the rules of FFP rather than really what you want to do with the club. That dictates basically how the owners run the football club rather than what they can always physically put in for these bigger clubs. It's a different story at the other end. Barnsley, Rotherham, clubs like that are having to operate on a more sustainable basis because their owners haven't necessarily got billions or whatever to put in, or that's the approach their owners want to take. Whereas clubs like Wednesday or Forest, where there's that bit more money there, they're having to basically run with the EFL's rules rather than what they'd want to do, as you would be able to do in the Premier League.
I'm sure we'll touch on FFP a bit later on in the podcast. So, I mean, Nancy, it must have been strange to see smaller clubs over the last sort of 5 or so years, like Watford, Bournemouth, Brighton, Burnley, Huddersfield, all up in the top flight. Now, I know that Twitter and fans on Twitter is not a gauge of anything, but with some clubs, it comes, for instance, Leeds, it comes across in particular that some fans think they've got a God-given right to be in the top flight. Is that the case with any Sheffield Wednesday fans at all, or is there a bit more humility up there?
I think, especially with recent years, like with where Wednesday have been and the things that have happened, I think that's less probably prevalent. And I mean, we don't need to talk about Sheffield United, but obviously that's happened in the last couple of years, and it's kind of hard to be across the city from that. And everyone's quite rightly praising Chris Wilde and everything that's going on there, so it's kind of, you can't be ignorant of the fact that the clubs that are up there are there because they've either played good football, they've had a little bit of luck, which I think is a massive thing in the Championship, especially when you get down to the playoffs, and it's just, yeah, there's a lot of things there, which I think maybe means that most Wednesday fans probably aren't, or haven't got that sense of entitlement that should be in the top flight, because it has been so long now. I think, without sounding really harsh, like if it was meant to be, they'd be there already or have been there. So yeah, that's probably my view on the Wednesday situation, but obviously I can't speak to Leeds and a few of the other sort of bigger clubs, but yeah.
Yeah, just on that, Daniel, who do you reckon are the most arrogant fan base in the Championship that we need to look out for?
I'm not going to go near that question. I agree, and I think there's certainly an element of Forest support that thinks, if you asked 50 random Premier League fans, probably of a certain age, it should be said, for their ideal 20 Premier League teams, I think Forest are probably in there, and I think Sheffield Wednesday would probably be in there as well. So I think that creates this idea that they're seen as a big club creates a certain pressure, and I think some fans are kind of happy to live up to that. But now I think there are Forest supporters most Forest supporters realise that those glory years, if they mean anything, they are only memories now. They are so far away. I wasn't born when they won either trophy. And it means nothing now. And if anything, it's held us back for too long rather than helped us. So this notion of being a big club, I remember when Forest went down to League One, and it sounds a very arrogant thing to say, but maybe it was the same for Wednesday, but we felt like everyone's cup final. We really did. And I think there's probably a sense of that in the Championship, that if you consider yourself to be one of the big clubs, you're kind of just going for pride before a fall there, because it's so relentless that you will lose games to teams that at the start of the season you think you should beat. That's the very nature of the league.
I must say I am old enough to remember that Forest side, and it was actually a great team to watch. The City Ground used to be a terribly muddy pitch to play football on as well. I remember some vintage games where the balls just seemed to get stuck in the mud, and Birtles used to stand on the 6-yard box, wait for it to stick in the mud and stick it in, and that was the game plan. It seemed to be half the matches, but yeah, no, I think Forest are a great club. But one other area that I think is interesting about the Championship is that you see those three clubs go up from the Championship to the Premier League, and they're always the three who are fancy to go straight back down because there's this perceived quality gap. Do you think that's still a thing, Daniel?
I don't know about a quality gap. There's certainly the financial gap. And I think what we have seen in the last few years is clubs like, Burnley did it, and I think Norwich have tried to do it, which is basically taking the money and run and say, well, this will help us for the next 5 years to push sustainably for the Premier League, rather than just go up, spend loads of money and then get relegated like maybe Fulham did a couple of years ago. I don't think there's a standout candidate in the Championship this season, I have to say. That probably is more of an insult than a compliment. Brentford were brilliant and were innovative and felt fresh last year. And if they can replicate that, then I think they probably will be the best team in the league. But you can't underestimate the power of a club like Norwich, who spent £2 million in the Premier League on new players, come down and bought, I think, they've got 8 new players and 3 more on loan already. So they're kind of looking at it as a 3-season project: go up, go down, go up better. But yeah, the quality of football isn't brilliant, I don't think, at times. I have to say that. It sounds like sacrilege, but I don't think the football is good at times. But the excitement's always there and the tension's always there, which kind of eclipses any need for quality. And the quality is there in flashes enough that it kind of takes you off guard. It surprises you. You know, when a player like Eze QPR runs a midfield at a young age and scores a brilliant goal, you're, oh yeah, of course, this is a really good football league. But it's got everything. I think that's how I sort of warp the insult into a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, Nancy, what's your view on it? I mean, do you think the footballing gap is closing between the Premier League and the Championship? Because you could argue that more newly promoted teams seem to be managing to stay up these days. So maybe you could say there's kind of less of a footballing gap, or do you not think it's the case?
I think obviously there is always that trope of them being, favoured for relegation. I think the gap's probably bigger from League One to the Championship, to be honest. And just because that's a financial thing, really. You don't see, or it's been a while since we've seen probably like Bournemouth or Norwich and Southampton when they went from League One almost straight through. And it's kind of, I think from the Championship to the Premier League, again, I'd agree with Daniel. This doesn't seem to be like, I wouldn't think of a runaway favourite at the moment for this season, apart from those with parachute payments that have maybe got a bit more to throw around to get, that 15-goal a season striker that every Championship team seems to be chasing desperately, and there just aren't enough of them out there, pretty much, for the right price anyway. But I don't know. I think the football quality is at times in the Championship a little bit lacking, to be honest. I think you can see the difference in pace maybe is where, like when I've watched, say, Leeds and Brentford this season, the intensity is there from what I think of when I watch a Premier League game, and kind of the relentlessness of it, which obviously to sustain over a Championship season is crazy. So the fact that they're able to do that makes me think that they'd be more ready for that transition to the Premier League, where I think it's a bit more forgiving in terms of the schedule. But I think there are a lot of, I find, and this could just speak to the quality of Wednesday's season last year, but there are quite a lot of sometimes nothing games in the Championship, like a 0-0, like midweek, and I kind of think, oh god, I've got to write about something here, and it's that's just part of my job that's the problem. But it's kind of there's not always like a massive talking point, but then when those games are there, which is like more than 3/4 of the time, but then it's crazy. It's the complete other end of the spectrum where it's like, oh my God, I've got reams and reams of things I could talk about, like tension. You know, sometimes I can barely peel myself away from the game to actually concentrate on writing on something because the atmosphere will be crazy. And so I don't know, it's very peaks and troughs, I think, the Championship, as a fan and a reporter. So
yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And the key is kind of managing those. The best managers seem to be able to kind of manage those troughs, because like I said before, you will lose games in the Championship that you think you shouldn't lose. You know, you will lose, and no disrespect, but a huge amount of disrespect, obviously, because I'm saying it. You will lose at Rotherham, you will lose at Luton, you will lose at Wycombe, and you'll feel like you shouldn't. But if you let that haunt you for even 10 days, then another 3 games have gone by. So it's those managers that are able to kind of take those players out of that firing line again. And like, clearly deep squads can help with that, but it's more about the psychology, I think. And you look at those managers who have done really well in the Championship, and I include Eddie Howe in this. When they went up, it's those managers who are can almost bottle up all the pressure and take it on themselves and take it off the players. That's what Bielsa did so well. You know, he took the spotlight away from those players. It wasn't just about them being intense. It was the fact that they felt that they could play the football they wanted to play, pressure free, even in high pressure scenarios. So yeah, and it's easier said than done as well. Otherwise, every manager would be doing it.
In the season that we got promoted, we went on a couple of really lengthy runs where we were unbeaten for a long time. Watford also came from nowhere to finish second that season. And when Villa got promoted the season before last, I think they won something like 10 in a row to get into that final playoff spot. Is it easy to put those sorts of runs together? Nancy, what do you think?
I think, yeah, that's part of basically the intense run of games that you can get in the Championship. It really does favour that once you get going. So, I memean, but then on the flip side, it can be disastrous. So I'll use like Wednesday's example again, but last season, you know, they were third at Christmas. They beat Forest 4-0, and it was, you know, one of the best performances I've seen from Wednesday in recent times, and absolutely like blitzed the first half. And Jordan Rhodes got a first half hat trick, which just hasn't been something that we've seen from him for the entirety of his Wednesday contract, to be honest with you. And that was great to see. And then after that, they just fall apart. And, you know, they won, I think it was 3, including the restart from New Year's Day onwards. So it can be easy to do that because they were on that run before Christmas. And then, again, like Daniel said about kind of the mentality and the psychology of it, where if you let the pressure or the fact that you're third in the table kind of get in your head, or you get complacent, then the wheels come off so fast. You can't, you know, you can drop like a stone just because everyone it has got that capability in them to then go on that run of 10 games. So, yeah, it's great because it can set up those like final stretches up to the final day, which is just wild. But yeah, it is possible, but chaotic.
It's speaking of putting a run together, it'd be interesting to ask both your opinions on this. I'll start with Daniel about the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. So for teams like Forest, are they a focus, or did the club feel that the cup sort of detracts from the overall aim of the team? I mean, you know, for instance, as a fan, is it something you'd worry about if you were to say, you know, get knocked out to Rochdale in the early rounds?
Not this season, I don't think, certainly. I was looking today, and as an example, Norwich have not rearranged their EFL Cup tie and are playing it on the 5th of September, when basically 15 members of their first team squad are going to be playing international football or with their international squads. So I think this season clubs are effectively going to, you know, completely deprioritise the League Cup because, you know, the reality is, and it's not romantic, but the league's where the money is. And, you know, I remember Sabri Lamucci. I was at Forest Chelsea last season in the FA Cup, and Forest put out a reserve side at Stamford Bridge and lost 2-0, but lost very, very comfortably. And Lamucci was asked afterwards, like, how can you pick a reserve team for a cup game? And he said, well, because I won't get sacked if we don't win the FA Cup, and I might get a collapse in the league. And that's the reality. You know, I think he was probably more honest than the Forest press officer would have liked at that time. But he's absolutely right. You know, it's so relentless, and this season will be even more so, that they are kind of just a fly in the ointment of league football, sadly. Maybe the FA Cup's slightly different because at least it has its own weekend, etc. But the League Cup certainly, I think, is going to be used as a pre-season tournament next weekend, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, in the Championship, it was clear that Eddie Howe just didn't. I mean, in the Premier League, it was extremely clear that the FA Cup just meant nothing to him. He paid lip service to it in his press conferences, but he can't really do anything but, can he? But it all started in the Championship, didn't it? Because from there, we knew that it was a tournament that we just didn't really care about. And especially as we were actually showing signs of actually doing well in that second season.
Well, it's been a shame because in the Carabao Cup, we got to the quarterfinals in a couple of the last two of the last three seasons, I think it was. So we could actually compete because other teams play their weak sides, but we just don't seem to. And I think this season in particular, the cups are just going to be irrelevant. I think just because the fixture relentlessness is going to be amplified because the season is so compressed. It's going to be madness for the players to keep fit all through the season.
Yeah, completely. I mean, what's the Sheffield Wednesday take on it? Obviously, you've been in the Championship now for a long period of time. Has it been something that's regarded as not important, the FA Cup, or is it something that the managers over the years have wanted to see the club have a run in?
I mean, I think obviously, again, this season's like a completely different situation for Wednesday, but typically, I don't know. I always see the FA Cup as a good excuse for a great away day for the fans, if nothing else. I mean, if we're being realistic, are we likely to see a Championship team win the FA Cup or even the Carabao Cup? Probably not. But, if you can do like Oxford or whoever, and, Wednesday went to Stamford Bridge, it might have been the season before last. And again, that was just a really great away day for the fans. They were comfortably beaten 3-0 again, similar to Forest. And it's not necessarily a fixture that realistically I think any manager in that position would say they were going to win, but it sparks so much more, I think, as well. So like this season, Wednesday beat Brighton, which I wasn't really expecting them to do. I don't think Gary Monk necessarily put out the strongest team. There were a couple of kids in there, and if he'd lost, then it would have just been we've lost a Premier League team, but they won. And then this again was at a time, in January where the form was terrible, but you think, okay, off the back of that cup run, can they carry that into the league? And so it can be useful in that respect, but also if you are chasing promotion in the Championship, it's probably one that managers will reluctantly admit that they're just willing to forget about and kind of, slide out of the competition gracefully, shall we say.
So I don't think we're going to miss the cups, but we're certainly not going to miss VAR as Bournemouth fans coming into the Championship.
Oh, dreadful.
Oh, my grief. Don't mention that. But in the playoffs, the Brentford manager said that the Championship needs it. Come on, is the only one, isn't he, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I assume you're referring to the goal or the non-goal against Southampton, which is, I mean, it wasn't the most controversial use of VAR, but was certainly the most impacting use of VAR in the season, I'm guessing.
Well, I think actually, I feel Burnley home and away, where the shoulder was in favour of Burnley when they beat us.
I'm picking up Grace here. Sorry.
But then, sorry, I've just got to get this off my chest. And then we had 2 goals disallowed at Burnley, and one of them led to their penalty that made it 2-0. So, but I'm moving on. After you.
This is how much Forest have hurt me over the years, is that I can't celebrate a goal without looking for a linesman's flag. Never mind thinking, maybe he was offside, so I need to worry about VAR. I couldn't handle it, I don't think. No, it's fine as it is. It's madcap as it is. It doesn't need anything else. What should be said kind of related to that is that the standard of refereeing isn't brilliant at Championship level. So, I mean, I wouldn't come in to a VAR-less league with kind of hope in your heart that everything's going to be okay, because you might well want it yourself come May. But it is nice not to have it.
Yeah. Nancy, what's your opinion on VAR? And, can you see it being adopted in the Championship at any point soon? Because, there's always talk of it. But, from my perspective, I've found as a fan, it's killed the moment completely. I mean, yes, if you haven't got VAR, there's always that quick look over to the linesman. Right, he's not flagging. Excellent. We can celebrate. But with VAR, even you can't go full throttle into celebrations. And sometimes there have been some moments and goals that have been chalked off that it's just lost the moment completely. And I think one of the stats that I always refer back to is when Bournemouth played West Ham at home last season. Josh King scored a goal. the referee ruled it out. VAR overturned it. It took 2 minutes, 2 seconds for that decision to be made. James Hayter, back in the day, he scored a 3-minute hat-trick in only 20 more seconds than that, which just sums it up completely. But what are your thoughts on VAR? And do you think it could be adopted in the Championship at any point soon?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think it's something that the Championship needs right now. Like, I'd agree with Daniel. I think the standard of the refereeing at times is a little bit wanting. But I don't know. I reckon just because of again, and it's purely down to money, but I think knowing how much promotion is worth to teams, I don't know if you might start to see some of those teams pushing, for that and for VAR, because sometimes it is down to a really hairline decision on an offside. And if promotion's worth 100 and whatever million it is now, and I don't know, it changes every year, doesn't it, with the playoff figure and all of that, it wouldn't be out of the question to start seeing teams maybe wanting to push for that. But and then it's a facilities thing, isn't it, and kind of who's willing to kind of shell out and install all of that and provide the officials for that. But I do think it would take something out of the game as well, because it's so breathless, a Championship game at times, where that's the most enjoyable part of it, is just not having a single second to get a hold of things. And I know what you mean about it kind of ruining things when you're a fan and it stops that. So I don't think I would want to see it overnight. It needs refining, doesn't it, before I think they introduce it elsewhere.
And Nancy, just because it's technology, it's still operated by humans.
Yeah. Wrongly or rightly, yeah.
Yeah. So you don't always get the right decision. Anyway, we're not going to have fans in the stadiums at least till October at the earliest. So, Daniel, are you aware of what the clubs are doing in terms of showing games on their own websites? I think for us, we've got we're using our own service to do it. But what's happening at Forest and the other clubs? Are you aware of it?
Yeah, I mean, we've gone down the iFollow route, which is by no means a perfect service. I'm laughing as I say that because I'm underselling that phrase. But effectively, season ticket holders will get to watch games for free with a login on the club site or iFollow site. And then I think every other supporter can play £10 per home game. Now, I guess the clubs can't show away games because obviously that's effectively the property of the home club. So I actually don't know if there's a way that I assume fans of any club can pay £10 to watch any game. But yeah, that's going to be the norm for supporters now, and I suspect for the foreseeable, even when they come back in October, I suspect we're looking at 30% capacity, which is no away fans and season ticket holders, perhaps even on a kind of rotation basis, and it's all very deeply depressing, albeit for very good reason. But I long for the day when you can have a full house, but I think we're a fair way off that, it's fair to say.
What's it been like for you, Nancy, being at stadiums that are empty? It must be a strange old experience, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. I think I've found like people that I've spoken to, fellow journalists and stuff, have been in one of two camps. It's kind of like either people feel really obviously grateful and honoured to be one of the few people in the ground, or a few other people that I've spoken to have been like, it's good to be there, but it's absolutely soulless and it just doesn't feel like football as we know it, which I can sort of understand really, because I mean, it's great because you get those insights of kind of hearing managers shouting at players and all the interactions that maybe we'd never normally pick up because it's lost in the crowd noise. But it does feel a bit like, if you ever go to an under-23s game and it happens to be in Hillsborough or something, and you kind of sat there watching it and you find yourself getting a bit sort of distracted, or just the background swell of the crowd can be so valuable, just to know when to look up from your laptop or whatever as a reporter. It is a bit strange. Yeah, I'll definitely be looking forward to when people are back, and again, especially with iFollow, for the ones that either we can't get to or hadn't been able to get to when it was the restart. iFollow is a bit of an experience sometimes, but it'll be interesting with Sky. Actually, I think now that Leeds have gone, they had so many Leeds games were on Sky, so you might start to see that spread a bit more evenly among other clubs, and Bournemouth might be one of them, to be fair.
What's the away game that you most enjoy, Daniel?
Well, local derbies aside, and actually I don't enjoy those at all because they make me feel sick. I'm not just saying this as Nancy is on. I'm saying it more because Forest won 7-1 there when I was about 9 years old and I went. But Wednesday is obviously a good away day. Ellen Road was a great away day. Fulham's always a good away day. I kind of think they fall into two camps. They either fall into atmosphere or pre and post game. I used to love going to Brighton. I've been to Bournemouth. Those games on the South Coast are always really nice when they're kind of proper away days. But as a fan, I'm kind of beyond, I've got beyond the point where the 90 minutes has to ruin my enjoyment of the whole day. I think you just a small part of it. But yeah, I guess Fulham's the one you kind of picked out from last season because of the kind of character of the place and on the bank of the Thames, and you've kind of got everything there.
Yeah, and Nancy mentioned Luton, and I certainly would go with that as well. Now, Nancy, regarding Sheffield Wednesday, we said we'd touch on it. Can you elaborate more on the financial situation there and the 12-point penalty? Because I mean, as a football fan that hasn't been concentrating on it fully, it's hard to understand the complexities. For instance, why was the penalty for this season coming rather than the last? And also, in the same breath, I just wonder if you can say why, if you feel as though these penalties are actually effective in ensuring the EFL clubs are being financially managed in the right way.
Yeah, it feels like it's taken over the entire second half of my season, so I'll try and keep it brief for you. But basically, the reason it's come about is because Wednesday sold Hillsborough effectively to the owner via a sort of separate company, but he owns the other company. So for 60 million, and that essentially meant that they could meet FFP. Otherwise, they'd have breached that by, I should know this off the top of my head by now, but tens of millions, basically. Yeah. I think it was 30 million or something they were due to breach it by. But basically, obviously, Derby have just been sort of cleared of a similar thing this week, and theirs has been fine because they accounted for it in the correct accounting year. I think Wednesday, basically, it emerged from one of the documents from the hearing that they knew they were coming up against it with FFP, and they didn't know if they were going to be able to shift players for money to counteract the amount of losses they were due to make. This is in 2017-18, and they were filing the accounts the following year. So they basically looked into the stadium sale, asked the EFL, and there seems to have been some conversation there about whether it was approved or not approved by the EFL. But the problem is basically with the accounting year, they've included the sale of Hillsborough in because they didn't register it until the following year, in essence. So it's kind of that, whether the sale itself doesn't seem to be a problem because Derby have been cleared of that sort of breaching the rules, and Villa have done it as well, and Reading also did it. It's more about the timing with Wednesdays. So now it's raised the question of kind of, can they include it in a subsequent year of FFP in the accounts, which is a bit odd, but in theory possible apparently. But the reason it was this year is partly because of the delay. So they first got charged in November, and it's taken until the start of July pretty much for that to happen. They have to do arbitration and all sorts before they get to even in front of the independent panel. And I think that was part of it, because where it was in the season, it's not the same as like with Wiggins with administration. You have to have your points deduction in the same season as the administration it happens. Whereas with any breaches of FFP, the panel can like impose whatever sanction they decide is fit, and they can impose it whenever. So this is why they put it into next season, kind of because it was almost too late, I think, for the season just gone. But also, I think they prefer for things to be sorted out on the pitch when it comes to FFP charges as well. You know, it would have relegated Wednesday, but it was almost too late with the appeal process, because Wednesday have appealed, and that'll rumble on now until probably October, November. So it's not going to be sorted anytime soon. Unfortunate for Charlton and people like that. So
yeah,
relegated.
Do you think it makes Wednesday nailed on certs for relegation, or are you looking upwards rather than downwards?
I think it's hard not to talk about the season in any other terms than survival first, and then, you know, looking up from that. But I wouldn't say that they'd be certain for relegation, just because obviously, as we said about before, you can hit those runs of, you know, 5-6 wins or good results, and that can be enough to send you from, you know, 14th to 6th in the blink of an eye in the Championship. So it's not to say that it's insurmountable, but it's obviously not helpful maybe that they're in it on their own, whereas before it looked like they might be kind of buddies with Derby, and you know, have had two of them in the same situation. But obviously it could all be lifted yet. You know, it could all be appealed. You know, if the appeal goes through, it could all be given back to them. So, but yeah, I think, you know, I'm sure the bookies will have them down for relegation, but I think they're building something good with the couple of signings they've got. So yeah, I'm optimistic rather than completely down about it.
Interesting. Okay, so we'll just wrap up by just briefly looking forward to this season, and we'll do some quick fire questions. And I'll come to you first, Dan. And who do you think is going to be in the mix for promotion this season?
I mean, going against my head, I'd pick Brentford and Norwich top two, I think, and then any one of, I mean, literally any four of about 12 clubs could make the playoffs. I think the most interesting club in the league is Coventry, who have obviously come up, but are the only promoted club not to feature in the 4 or 5 favourites to get relegated. And their recruitment model's great. They buy really good young players. Mark Robins doing a sensational job given the owners. So I think they're the most interesting club, but I don't think they'll be anywhere near promotion. So yeah, Norwich and Brentford are my two, I think. Interesting.
Nancy, who are you fancying for this season?
Yeah, I'd definitely go Brentford. I think I'd probably throw Swansea into the mix, just because I don't know, I feel like they were sort of getting there with something maybe, but I know that they were a bit hit and miss last season. Then, oh god, yeah, the rest of the playoffs is always a bit of a mixed bag. Norwich is probably a good shout, actually, just for who they've signed. I should say Bournemouth, really, shouldn't I? That's a bit hard.
A bit discourteous of Daniel not to mention it, but
that's fine.
But what about Wigan? I mean, I was staggered when they beat was it Birmingham 8-0? I mean, they I mean, I know they had the points deduction as well, but they look like they were a decent outfit, unless they've had to sell all their players now.
Yeah, I mean, they have sold loads of players, and one of the themes of this Championship summer is that not many clubs, I think pretty much Norwich have bought as many first team as almost as every other club put together. I know Coventry 2 or 3, but they're mainly youngsters. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be, we're in a situation where nobody knows what the financial future is going to be, and the financial future was pretty bleak anyway. So nobody really knows what players are worth, or whether they should sell them now or wait and hope the market rebounds. So it's a very odd summer. Which I guess could mean that a team can kind of steam from nowhere and with that kind of unity we talked about and make a real go at it. But I mean, you're cleverer people than me if you can pick out that team, because I think I think there's genuinely 12 clubs that would be confident of getting into the playoffs. You know, even Middlesbrough, who struggled last season, even Stoke, who really struggled last season, they would look at it now and say, well, it's a new start. There's no reason why we can't be in the top 6, because there's such a kind of I want to say it in a way that doesn't sound insulting, but there's such a kind of mush of teams with virtually the same ambitions in that league. It's astonishing, really.
And this is why it's an exciting league, Jeff. You're talking about 12 teams, in the Premier League, the top 6, that's taken care of. And to be honest, for Bournemouth, you've got your sort of teams that come after that, Wolves, Leicester. And then, we're thinking maybe we can have a top half finish at 10th, perhaps. But other than that, now we're in the Championship, the sky's the limit, isn't it? Nancy, what players have captured your eye that are going to be featuring in the Championship next season? Who should we be looking out for?
I was going to say Eze, but I think he's on the brink of something by the sound of it. For a Premier League move somewhere. He was really outstanding every time I saw Wednesday against QPR. Ollie Watkins is probably like the most obvious one, maybe to shout out from Brentford. Trying to think who else now. Should be more obvious having watched at least every team once last season.
You're not going to say Lewis Grabban, are you, Nancy?
Oh yeah, of course I should. I'm not doing anyone enough here, am I, with players, but yeah. And actually, Louis Sibley at Derby was someone that obviously quite exciting. Being young, and I'm seeing what he's done so far. But yeah, I have a think of more. I should have a list of like top 10 ready.
What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean the Brentford players are great but the weird thing again about this season is that the window's not going to close till October, and they haven't sold any of those players yet. But it only takes a Premier League club to start the season badly, and suddenly their price tag might go up and they might get sold. Yeah, it's the young players for me. I'm really excited to watch. Those Norwich players coming back like Max Aarons and Todd Cantwell, and I think they are a class above. I think Bournemouth, as it stands now, have got players who should be far too good for the Championship. It's just whether, I guess, you can hold on to some or all of those until mid-October. Yeah, and I'll obviously say a Forest player because I think Joe Lolley is one of the most talented players in the division. If he wasn't brilliant last season by his standards of the season before, but if he gets it right, then Forest have always got a chance.
Okay, and as a Bournemouth podcast, we're interested to know your views on us and how you think we'll fare, as well as our relegation stablemates Norwich and Watford. Do you see us and those two sides as contenders, or do you think which one of us is going to drop like a stone?
I don't think Bournemouth will drop. I don't think any of them will drop like a stone. I don't see anyone doing a Huddersfield, if you like, from last season. I think Bournemouth are one of those teams that are incredibly hard to know what to expect of, because you've got as you well know, you've got a rookie manager and nobody really knows as of now what the squad's going to look like. You've already sold Ake and Ramsdale and even those players who have left, like Simon Francis, the experience, Andrew Sermon, Charlie Daniels. There's a heck of a lot of players out that first team squad gone. And it's a league in which you kind of need a deep squad. I was quite surprised to see all those players released, I have to say, because I think Bournemouth now, to me, looks quite low on numbers. But I think, as I say, I think you've got players who are too good for the league. And if you keep even 2 or 3 of those, then you'd consider playoffs as a reasonable expectation.
So what do you reckon of not just us, but what about Watford? And we haven't really talked much about them and their rotating door of managers.
Yeah, I think things look, I don't know, so much more unstable there. I think of the 3, like obviously you look at Norwich, and because they have bounced up and down obviously quite a few times now and fairly recently, you almost think they'll be able to learn from that experience, or have the foundations to know how to go again. But Watford's interesting. I feel like they've got just like a lot of players in my mind when I think of Watford. There's like just a lot of players, like quite a deep squad, which is probably good. But then obviously now they're starting to lose a few people. I think Decore and someone else as well. So I think in my mind, they've maybe got a lot more of what I think is a Premier League player. I don't know if that sounds unfair on Bournemouth's team, but I think that will actually stand Bournemouth in better stead for the Championship. Like, just like a couple of the names at both clubs, if you compared them, I just feel like maybe Bournemouth will adapt better or be more attuned to kind of that intensity or what's required from the Championship. I won't, question Watford's cojones because we've been there before, but with Trodini and stuff. But no, I think it'll be interesting. Again, yeah, the managerial changes and stuff, I think, probably do count for a lot, where Norwich have obviously still got Daniel Farker, and he did such a good job before. So, yeah.
What about relegation, Daniel? Who are your three to go down?
I think Wycombe, Rotherham, and I've been picking Reading to go down for about 5 years in a row now. So at some point, their massive overspending, despite not having a particularly effective squad, is going to have to haunt them. So I will go Reading for the probably 6th year in a row.
Interesting. Well, you know what? It's going to be an exciting season. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. Nancy, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck this season.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to chat to you guys.
And also, Daniel, we really appreciate your input, and we just hope for you, at least, it's less of a last gasp season for Forest this time around, eh?
Yeah, I need to go and check whether Forest are playing Bournemouth really late on in the season.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. And Jeff, as ever, thank you so much for being on.
No, thanks. It's been great, and great to hear different perspectives as well. And maybe we should do a mid-season catch up, the same group, see where we're all at.
Yeah, it's who knows? We'll have a midterm report, I'm sure. And yeah, thanks guys, and thank you at home for watching as well. Remember to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed tonight's press pass, and also be sure to subscribe as well, because we got some more videos coming up in the next couple of weeks, and we're looking forward to a brand new season in the Championship. Until then, up the cherries, and we'll see you in the next video.